as you said, with the programs looking to upgrade, there have been rumors everywhere about that. Of course, Heltbron not directly commenting on it, but hasn't shot down the idea of the Stony Brook programs moving to a conference like the A10, which many of the fan base and our listeners as well have been clamoring for the Seawolves to move to. And with that in mind, it's tough for me to really keep the same personnel when they haven't been producing NCAA competition.
Well,
Fiore's contract comes up through the 2022 season. So definitely a lot of questions in terms of if he gets another extension like he did it in 2018 or 2016.
Every time we get a new athletic director, it's kind of like getting a new general manager on a professional team. They want their own people in place. And in many cases, now, of course, if there's a coach that's been there long term and has proven successful, like a Matt Sank, for example, he's pretty safe. But on the other hand, Sue Ryan, who was the longest-serving coach before Matt Sank, going back to the D3 era, Matt Sank is the only coach right now that coached the Seawolves in D3. Actually, he coached them when they were the Patriots. We're talking 1991. He's been there 30 years. So, with that going for you, and you've seen Sean making decisions here and there, he hasn't demonstrated any tendency to clean house, but you got two things coming into play here, okay? If Sean stays, for example, and there's an upgrade, there may be pressure to make some moves. Now, I don't think necessarily there are going to be too many changes in the established sports because they're already equipped to compete at a higher level, I think. In terms of logistics, in terms of how the team operates, and also the coaches and their backgrounds and things like that, they're really meant to make that move when they're ready. But I have a lot of friends, and you do too, and everybody, and you went to LIU post, Casey, so you know a lot of people from Hofstra. Yeah. Okay, you majored in mass communications here, so you know a ton of people who will tell you about Hofstra sports, and you've had lots of conversations about them. But number one beef with Hofstra, actually, there are two. Beef number one, they dropped football. But the president who dropped football retired. Oh, yeah. That's one. Number two, they went from the America East to the CAA in every other sport, but football, naturally. CAA football is great. CAA football is a power conference in FCS. They send multiple teams to the NCAA tournament. CAA basketball is a one-bid conference, and yet the competition is much tougher because you had a George Mason come out there for the Final Four. You had a Virginia Commonwealth with a deep tournament run. Where are they now? The A10. Yeah. So the Hofstra is looking to do the same thing. And Hofstra and Stony Brook have a history of butting heads because when Stony Brook first went Division I way, way back in 1999, they wanted to get into the America East, and Hofstra blocked it. Oh, really? CAA. Yeah, no, America East. We're talking. Okay. When Jay Wright was coach at Hofstra, okay, with Speedy Claxton, who's now the coach at Hofstra. Right. But former NBA player. Yeah, but Hofstra did not want Stony Brook to enter the conference because they didn't want, number one, a rival on Long Island in conference, and number two, and as I'm sure as a student you know this very well, it costs a fraction to go here of what it costs to go there.
Oh, Hofstra's crazy expensive.
Exactly. But also when they do scholarships, they base them on those prices. So they have to raise a lot more money for scholarships than Stony Brook does.
That's like Post, too.
Exactly. Same idea. And Post is D2.
Post is D1.
Oh, that's right.
They went D1.
They went up to
the
D1?
Sharks, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They didn't do very good there when I was there.
They won't for a few years yet. We suffered too for 6 or 7 years. But the point still remains, and this exists all over college sports. I mean, another example in the Pac-12, USC is a private school, UCLA is a public school, and USC has been complaining about this for decades. It costs a lot more for us to raise money for scholarships, but on the other hand, we own half of Hollywood, so yeah, we do get money. But USC's film school, of course, everybody knows that what they've done and how many people coming out of there. But I don't know how many people can contribute to athletics out of there. But USC is, of course, has the reputation. Although Stony Brook did beat USC in baseball once.
And lacrosse.
Regular season, yeah. But
It's
the whole point still remains, though, when you're upgrading, you don't want to do what Hofstra did, and that happened back in 2002. When Hofstra left, Drexel and Delaware also left. They went to the CAA, and they went from a conference where it was a lot easier to win, and Hofstra was winning the American East and going to the NCAA. When you went to the CAA, you had your Masons and your VCUs, and Hofstra got aced out of a bid, by George Mason in 2006 when Mason went to the Final Four. So Hofstra has been banging their heads against the wall for the past 20 years, and they want to upgrade into a multi-bid conference, and so does Stony Brook, because Stony Brook has excelled at the American East level. Last year, they won the Commissioner's Cup, which is a general excellence trophy, which is a trophy that they had been struggling to get for a long time. But what that reflects, because you get credit for high finishes in all the sports, it shows how balanced your athletic program is, that you don't have just a couple of good teams and everybody else is bad, like New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So that also shows people, and now the other thing about it is that now the American East is complaining that Stony Brook's getting a little bit too big for it. That's the reason we went D1 in the first place, because when we were D3, look how big this school is.
It's ginormous.
It's a big state school. It's not as big as the University of Michigan, but it's still...
It's well known.
Yeah, it's well known. Big state school. What's it doing competing in Division III? And what's it doing competing against schools 1/10 its size?
Yes.
So that's why they did it. So the same issue goes here. We're a big school. Now, the next thing that I'm going to present to you guys, Stony Brook went to the America East with Binghamton and Albany. And there are 4 SUNY centers. Buffalo has been off on its own for a long time. They went D1 10 years before everybody else did. But Buffalo is an extension of Canada. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
so far up.
It is the only time I've ever flown in an airplane and landed in the same state. I flew from New York to Buffalo. So, Buffalo is another animal altogether, but the other 3 centers have pretty much done everything together. And if Stony Brook has these aspirations, what about the other 2?
right, and really just to tie us all up before we shift gears, it is part of the reason why football, though CAA, not American East, factors so much the success in terms of looking to these future conferences. And it's, again, something Sean Hellebron's definitely taking a bigger notice of now that we're in year 3 of a downward season, where, again, you see, football, your biggest moneymaker, undisputedly, statistics back that up, even bigger than ranked lacrosse teams or talented basketball teams or baseball teams for that matter. Your biggest moneymaker is not producing on the big stage. How do you expect it to produce should a conference you look into getting, to try to pick it up as well? If they're not producing in CAA, how are they producing the A10? You don't want a Rutgers scenario where they were really getting stomped on for a while. Now, obviously, starting to get a bit better. But, you really don't want them to be a designated, easy win pass of the conference. So a lot of questions going on the administrative side. But
okay, you're back on live. How are you? Your name, where are you calling from?
Jay from Stony.
Jerry, how are you? What do you want to talk about? Okay, what's on your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to talk about Stony Brook sports, the discussion earlier about the football business, upgrading conferences, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, what's your take on it?
They're probably where they are, competitive, probably in the right spots. You don't want a situation where you're like where you're like in Big Ten and you're overreached constantly. That doesn't seem good. And I think they get their bigger sports straightened out, like basketball and football, they probably need to play in the right spots.
So you say you think they're in the right conference, they don't necessarily need to upgrade?
I don't think it would be good for them to be losing all of it, which is probably what would happen if they upgrade right now.
To upgrade to a multi-bid conference means a much bigger commitment in terms of money, in terms of resources. And you're doing it at a time when both of them are short. And maybe you make the most of an opportunity. Let's say, I'll say that a lot of businesses got their start during the Great Depression. Big ones, big companies. And they took advantage of a bad economy to build from scratch. But you're not building from scratch here. You have an established program, and you're trying to take a step up. Now, are you exploiting a vulnerability and taking the step now, or do you take it when times are better? You could be taking advantage of teams rolling things back. I mean, Hartford, perfect example in the American East, they're downgrading to D3, largely because of the problems that COVID brought on. So, this is something that...
For me, I take the angle in terms of what the teams are producing. Yeah, would it be nice to see Stony Brook in a Power 5, or even, the A10 or the CAA completely, as fans and our listeners have obviously been discussing, have been for? Yeah, it would, realistically. Again, going back to the Stony Brook winning the Commissioner's Cup, as you said, it's not something that's been theirs for years. They're not essentially a write-in for, they're going to have the best programs year in, year out. It's a recent trend that has been done because of years of calculations and signings and, finding balances for each program, from scholarships to talent and players, from Sean Helbron and just the athletics department in general. And again, they've only been, the best team or program in the conference for the last couple of years. It's been Albany that's been dominating that Commissioner's Cup for the past few years. And we know how good women's lacrosse is, always nationally ranked. But if we're looking at the rest of the programs, what would bumping them up to another conference really do for them? To me, it would make there be a lot more challenges, but it'd definitely take a lot longer for them to kind of match up to where the opposition is in a CAA, or especially in an A10. They'd probably be the bottom dwellers for a long time, like Hartford. And as we've seen in Hartford, them being the bottom dwellers in a lot of their programs ultimately led to them not getting as much money as they probably should have had they been in a more balanced conference for their talent, and led to them dropping back down to D3.
The history has been of Stony Brook. They've moved up as they've been able to dominate the conference, or at least stay at the very top echelon for a long time.
Matt.
You go back when they were in the Southern Conference, or even before that, and you Hofstra before. Hofstra was the gift that kept on giving, because if Hofstra didn't drop football, we never would have gotten all those players that pulled our program notch. And then them also leaving CAA made that opening.
Hofstra is a different animal, largely because of a fellow named Stuart Rabinowitz. He was the longtime president of the university. He dropped the football program to help finance, I believe it was a law school or a med school?
Medical school.
Medical school. So he's gone now. They now have a new president in place, and judging from what the alumni have been telling me, he's much more supportive of the athletic programs than Rabinowitz was. Rabinowitz kind of saw him as a liability, and that's not necessarily the case coming out of the president's office now, which is good for them. But it also means that they are going to be looking at the same thing Stony Brook has been looking at, and we're going head-to-head again. And Hofstra and Stony Brook have a rivalry on many levels. Yes, on the field, but also off the field. I explained that whole thing about the American East 20 years ago. But again, it would be great to have them both on the same level, in the same conference, competing for the same things. And I think it would be great for Long Island, great for the students, great for the fans, great for everybody. And also with the UBS Arena coming online, by the way, the first big college basketball game being played there is going to be St. John's, Kansas. I believe that is going to be sometime in November. So that's another thing. St. John's now has options. They've been selling Madison Square Garden to recruits. They can play in UBS. I told one of my Hofstra buddies, why don't you guys go to UBS or take over Nassau Coliseum? It's right next door, because they need dates. But Hofstra, it's been a strange trip following them over the years. They have they'll make a move to upgrade, and then they'll take a step forward, they'll take a step back. Stony Brook, they've been taking steady, small steps forward, which is you can tell it's fairly linear when you look at Stony Brook's growth over the years. And yeah, maybe they're knocking on the door. Maybe it is time to make a jump, and maybe instead of rolling back like everybody else is doing in the aftermath of COVID, maybe this is a time to take the leap.
You know, you never know. You got to find an opening, and I know it's hard. They don't come up that often in conferences when shifting around, so you always got to be ready. But, I've gone to the football games, and they haven't even been drawing, very much.
They haven't been very good.
Even 3 years ago.
It's very dependent. You know as well as anybody, it's highly dependent on their success on the field.
Yeah.
Okay, they will pack the place for a playoff game. Okay, the attendance record for the place is over 11,000 for a football game. It's slightly under 11 for a lacrosse game. So, and both were NCAA tournament games, by the way. So, they'll be there. If the team is there, they'll be there.
I think football team also needs to get back to recruiting high school players. They've been overly dependent on transfers for too long, and they haven't been on the way they need to.
Yeah. And like you said, like we said with the Hansen winners, they picked up 2 of them from Hofstra as transfers. So they weren't able to benefit from that once after those classes had cycled out. But thanks for your call. Keep listening, because this is going to be. I think this is going to be a headline event throughout the year.
All right. Take care.
Ken, as I said, it's definitely going to make headlines, I think, in the statesman and the press throughout the year, what Stony Brook's future plans are in sports.
And again, I want
and also relatively new president here, too.
All right, since 2012, Belvern took over.
Yeah. So
I do want to add again on the conversation. You point out it's been very calculated, slow, steady. You said not trying to rush it. And I think that works, and it's why I wouldn't be a fan of Stony Brook moving up to a different conference now, but that's not to say I wouldn't be opposed to it in maybe 5 to 10 years, because, again, let's look at, as you said, Hofstra, where they really rushed into it, and it was rough for the start for a lot of those years, and ultimately they had to cut back on some things, like football.
Hofstra had one problem, though, that Stony Brook has not had to deal with. They had a president that was not big on athletics.
Right.
Rabinowitz rarely attended any athletic events, except there was a dedication for something, retired number, or some kind of award. Then he'd show up. But for the most part, that was not the case with Stanley. That's not the case with any president.
Definitely not the case with McGinnis. Being at every game and hockey as well.
Right, and that's also very important, because we had Dr. Stanley on during halftime of lots of games.
Right.
But very supportive.
I also do want to add on that too. I think more on the talent side, where let's take Hartford for example. If they were in a division or in a conference where it was more balanced, tailored towards the talent they have, I think the attendance would be better, and you wouldn't have to worry about having a level down or cut back on scholarships to where now there's going to be no scholarships. But even when they were in D1, allegedly, having to cut down on scholarship amounts, but because, as you said, the talent, if the teams have the talent, the fans are going to come. We know Stony Brook Women's Lacrosse, for example, they have the talent, usually amongst the best teams, if not the best team nationally ranked. They're always going to sell out or close to sell out, the exception of a pandemic. But for the other teams, baseball's been good, basketball's been good, but not to that level consistently like women's lacrosse, to where they're always going to dominate in the conference. Stony Brook's recently become Commissioner Cup winners. They haven't consistently been Commissioner Cup winners like Albany.
True.
So to rush that process and get them to a bigger conference now, I think will lead to disaster. And again, the malaise era, as you said, you're seeing the effects suffer for football. And if you want to spread that across to your other programs as well, it's ultimately just going to neuter the progress that these programs have made, especially on the women's side, seeing the increase in attendance for women's lacrosse, women's basketball, women's soccer compared to 15 years ago, Matt.
Well, I don't have the books in front of me. That's the thing. I don't have the data. That Sean Helbron has the data. Rob Emmerich has the data. Okay. They have to look, and like I said, you're balancing your own condition with the conditions around you. And is there a window when teams are rolling things back, things are cutting back, or teams, again, maybe dropping out of the A10 or something like that, or moving on to a bigger conference? Is there going to be, remember, there was a whole wave of movements when the SEC doubled in size, the Big Ten became the Big 12, Pac-10 became Pac-12. There was a lot of movement in a very short period of time when the Big East blew up and half of them went to the ACC. That was happening, again, 2 or 3 year period. You have to play it right. You have to play your cards just right. Remember also, when Stony Brook moved to the America East in 2002, it was able to do so because 3 schools left, Hofstra, Drexel, and Delaware. They all went together to the CAA, left openings for Stony Brook, Albany, and Binghamton. And like I said earlier in the show, what do you do with Albany and Binghamton? Because under ideal circumstances, I'm sure SUNY Central and Albany would like to have all 3 schools continue to participate at the same level in the same conference. However, Binghamton in particular is the one that, again, I don't know enough about it to really say it authoritatively. I can only say is it appears that Binghamton got burned so badly by trying to do it the easy way with basketball, try the quick way, that they've been rather gun-shy ever since. And that means that their development in sports has maybe trailed Stony Brook and Albany just a bit. Again, I could be wrong, because I'm sure there's going to be somebody at Binghamton saying, no, we're fully committed, what have you. But that's just the perception I got. And for it to work, if you want your SUNY centers, again, on the same level and competing against each other, you got to do everything together. You got to make the move together. And where are you going to go? Where the A10 is going to be the A20? It's really going to be it's not a problem that can't be solved. It's a problem in some cases will solve itself by what other people do. But Stony Brook, basically, what they're doing is sending feelers out, I think. 1, to get fan reaction. 2, to get other schools' reaction to Stony Brook taking advantage of other schools rolling back their programs and moving forward and taking a jump upward. And I think that's the time to do it. When other schools are suffering, you take advantage. But are you in a position to? Lots and lots of, twofold effects going on, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
But it is a good time to be a Seawolves fan because, 1, overall, despite the fact that football's been struggling, the trend is still upward. And the growth is still upward. So, and especially under these conditions, it's still upward. We could be Hartford. We don't want to be Hartford.
There's so much room to grow.
Right. And that's the other thing. There is room to grow because we're not... I remember when we first made the transition in Division I. I heard people, from the D3 era say, we're going to be like University of Alabama, turn into a football factory. What, are you kidding? We're a long way from that, and not only that, no school in this region is anything close to that. So,
no.
Let's keep things in perspective. I still have conversations with friends from the Bay Area. Say, remember the New York market. Even when your pro teams are bad, you have the Pac-12 to fall back on. We don't have that.
Yeah. The other thing too, again, just before we switch gears, is Statesman just really recently, just within the hour, put out an article on this topic. Noting that, funding, the tennis issues are really what struggles Stony Brook from gaining national recognition despite winning over 25 conference championships within the last decade. And there's a report they cite from USA Today from the last 10 years where although Stony Brook has spent the 25th most, this is back in 2019, of its allocated athletics funds out of 227 D1 schools, the revenue they're making back only ranks 90th, which although is the most in the America East, again, it shows the equity isn't there in terms of that recognition. And you even see it too in just how it is on campus, where, fan interest is, I'd say, at a medium, but it's not necessarily as hardcore as it is at other schools like a UAlbany, like a Binghamton, even like a Maine.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, compare. We're still, even though we are a long train ride to New York City, we're still part of the New York market. And therefore, we compete with the pros. And New York is a pro-team city. Okay? We've never had the closest thing to major college football we had was before the NFL became a factor, pre-World War II, when Army would play in the Polo Grounds. Okay? Army was New York's team, and Army was a power back then. So that nothing ever built really. Notre Dame would play in the Polo Grounds. Notre Dame was sort of New York's college team, even though they played in South Bend, Indiana. So those are the things that's New York's college football history. Rutgers has the oldest college football program in the world. They date back to the Civil War.
That's insane.
That is insane, but Rutgers is the oldest continuously operating college football program in the country. So, yet, what kind of success have they had over the years?
Right. I'll say this to everyone listening, because we got to talk MLB now. But you want Stony Brook to advance, move up to the conference, start donating, start getting your friends, all your peers to donate. What the private donators at Rutgers or UMass are donating, because until you reach that part, Stony Brook's not going anywhere.
Well, Fordham, you want to look at another place with a long history in collegiate athletics, but the last 40, 50 years has been kind of off the radar. Fordham. But Fordham, they have delusions of grandeur because they do have big alumni contributors, and their teams just sputter. I mean, look at their basketball team. That team was supposed to be on a par. That team is competing in the A-10. Okay? Not very well, but there it is. Can we do better in Fordham? Do we have the alumni base of Fordham? No, not yet. We should. That's the thing about Stony Brook. We are a science school. We have doctors and scientists all over the place, and they got money. Is it coming to Stony Brook? Nope. And
not at all.
That's been a struggle since I was a student. Okay, so that's going to continue to be a struggle until somebody. But what they've been doing was to build up the athletic programs so that Stony Brook looked more like a traditional, big college. And the other thing about it is that Stony Brook got into this, one, to get the name out, and two, to increase the value of a Stony Brook degree. Stony Brook degree gets more nationwide recognition now than it ever did. And it means that my degree, your degree, everybody's degree means that much more on a resume. So that's very important. If you go out to California and apply for a job and you have a degree from Stony Brook, they know what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But 10 years ago, not so sure. They think Stony Brook's a small liberal arts college on the end of Long Island. Well, it is on the end of Long Island, but it's not a small liberal arts college. Ward Melville, I think, intended it to be like that, but the state got involved. Nelson Rockefeller got involved. Okay, for those of you not familiar with Nelson Rockefeller, he was talk about a Republican in name only. He was big tax and spend, and he was he lived up to the motto of New York State, Excelsior. He built and built and built. Okay, and also had Robert Moses do likewise. But Rockefeller did everything big, and Rockefeller glommed onto the SNUI system, and he made it big.
Oh yes.